Welcome to RFA Convention 2025, where we celebrate trucking.
All right, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the panelists to come and present their subject. We've got exactly 39 minutes. And I'll do a quick intro. And then from the intro, I'll ask you to do your presentation. Keep it as short as possible. Lunch is around the corner and I don't miss a meal. All right, so there we have it. And then we'll ask questions at the end. Please do put your questions through on Menti. I will choose to, no, I won't ignore them. Whatever questions we don't get to will definitely be responded to, and we'll post those responses with all the questions. So please do ask the questions that you need to ask. Right, as a start, sorry, to get that out of the way. Is it Liza or Liesel? I'm not sure, I always get confused with that. Okay, so we've got Liesel here, Liesel de Wet. She is the chairperson of the Road Freight Association's Green Transport Interest Group. Liesel is a dynamic force driving sustainability and green transport within the supply chain sector, a passionate climate reality leader and sustainability advocate. Liesel combines her extensive expertise with a deep commitment to eco-friendly practices, holding a BCoB in communication and an honours in marketing communication from the University of Johannesburg. She's also equipped with various qualifications in sustainable business practices. Liesel's leadership is shaping a greener future for the transport industry. Now, before you get up, should I prepare a similar thing? Because, that sounded very much like a good CV. Can I borrow? All right, Liesel, the floor is yours. Can you please present to us on, from fossil forward, what's next in the freight energy space?
Thank you so much, Kevin. And it's always great to chat to everybody. I think 2024 has actually been quite a landmark year. Why has it been a landmark year? It's been another hottest year on record. In fact, the past consecutive 20 years have been the hottest on record. And we're not moving away from this. Climate change is a science, and there's a lot of rhetoric going around it being manufactured, it's not real, but in reality it is happening. And we know that carbon dioxide emissions is definitely accelerating our impact on the climate. So we know the sources, and there are solutions on how to deal with this. And we saw the MBI did a phenomenal study, it's about a few years ago now, we were part of the working group, on how does the transport industry transition to a net zero future. And there were 3 prongs. And Ian, I'm glad you presented prior to me, because obviously movement from road to rail is one prong, and that's been really covered quite well. The second prong was technology, and the other one was alternative fuels. And I want to talk a little bit about technology, because technology is playing a massive role in how we reduce our emissions. If you take a look at all the onboard telematics that we have on our vehicles, the technology advancements in the space, it really helps to manage our existing footprint a lot better. And data is really key critical. We have clients. Transport is a massive material impact for any supply chain, and they need to know what is the transportation leg of their supply chain contributing to their overarching supply chain. This kind of reporting is now being mandated in Europe, and this is coming down the track. And Scope 3 emissions, which are supply chain emissions, are part of this compulsory reporting directive. We're also seeing technology play a massive role in the advancement of, for example, electric trucks. So charging stations and faster charging stations are also key critical. We've often spoken about this on these forums. It takes too long to charge my truck. We can't afford to have a truck sitting overnight somewhere while it's being charged. We're seeing an advancement in charging station technology. So this infrastructure is really key in order for EVs to take hold in the market and to be successful, and they do come at a cost. Also, battery technology is another area which has got a lot of attention, and it's moving pretty quickly. So it's becoming more apparent. South Africans always say we have range anxiety. Of course, we have range anxiety. We've got a lot of country to cover. And so it's really becoming the microgrids, like your small delivery scooters, those kind of things, and your small vehicles, so your last mile, your middle to low ranges, absolutely perfect for EV. And my prediction there is it's going to absolutely dominate that market. And we're actually seeing a lot of that also happen in Africa, the uptake of electric bikes, scooters, those kind of things. And that's really, really great. The long haul, we're still debating and discussing a lot of those solutions. And I think hydrogen is definitely coming up more and more and more as a feasible solution. There are a lot of pros and cons around this technology, and a lot of research that still has to be done around when will this be viable. But all major OEMs are, in one form or another, testing vehicles. I know they've been tested. Obviously, about 2 years ago, when we did our hydrogen research study tour in Europe, we actually saw them in action. We saw charging stations where you could get your biodiesel, your hydrogen, or charge your electric vehicle. So this is becoming a reality, closer than what we think it is. Another perfect example of technology is Al Gore and a whole bunch of beneficiaries in America, such as Duke University. They've literally mapped the world's carbon emissions. It's called Climate Trace. I encourage you to go and have a look, where they've literally mapped the entire globe's carbon emission using AI. So you can go in any region and have a look at what the carbon emissions are and would be. And this is really phenomenal. I mean, I don't think anybody could imagine. When I first heard it, I'm like, what, the whole globe, the whole world's carbon emissions? And so that's definitely happening. We're seeing some legislation coming through. So there was a lot of chatter around the New Clean Fuel Bills Act, which is scheduled for 2027, and a lot of talk about whether this will or will not happen. I had a chat to a colleague at Sapir. He reckons it will definitely happen, but it remains to be seen. And obviously new technologies, well, not so new, we do know this, such as Euro 6, coming through quite a lot now. And I think one of the biggest challenges in the next chapter in the Green Book in the conversation is how do we finance this transition? It is a challenge. Technology is expensive, it comes at a premium. We're all under margin pressures. It's not cheap. But we need to look at what can we work with partners, government institutions, how do we fund this transition? And it's not that far away. There's a lot of talk around it. In fact, I attended a conference, the Green Africa Economy Summit, and the main theme throughout that was financing. Let's finance this transition. Let's work together. So there is an absolute understanding that this does come at a cost, and we have to find the correct way, the partnering way of how do we finance this transition. And that's going to be center stage moving forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think in a nutshell, those are the key elements that are coming up. The future is bright, it's exciting. I was at the UN Global Compact at a leadership conference, and they had all these really clever guys on stage from the banks and investment areas, and the comment that came out was, don't let a good crisis go to waste. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to think about this. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. And I think as an industry, we're used to operating in crisis. We have it all around us, we're adaptable, and we're definitely moving into an era of resilience, adaptability, risk mitigation. This is coming in our direction, and I think we're really well placed to address these things. And we need to keep our eye on the long game and make sure that when these technologies become commercially viable and we can use them, that we do. Thanks very much.
Right, thank you, Liesl. I think we're all awake now. Right, our next panelist is Mike Daniel. Mike Daniel is the CEO of Rail Runner South Africa. Mike Daniel is a leader in innovative intermodal transport solutions. He's got a strong background in transport and logistics infrastructure. Mike has a proven track record in driving efficiency and sustainability in the sector. He holds a degree in industrial engineering and has held various senior roles, leading initiatives that integrate rail and road freight to create smarter, more sustainable transport solutions. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thanks for the invite. And thank you to Ian for setting the scene on road to rail. I'm going to walk around a bit because I want to point this slide out to you. Africa is one of the largest continents in the world. However, on all maps, it's depicted much smaller than what it actually is. And please focus on the amount of rail in Europe and the amount of rail in India, and then look at Africa. If we look at Africa, 10% or 20% of the rail is on Mediterranean Africa, 60% is in SADC, and the remaining 20% is spread over the rest of Africa. So Africa is crying out for a solution that embraces both road and rail. We do not have roads everywhere. We're talking about the African highway. We're talking about a high-speed rail in Africa. But these are all futuristic plans. What do we do tomorrow? I was privileged to be at Africa Rail last week, and in a pre-Africa Rail presentation at Transnet Engineering, both the CEO of Transnet Engineering and Michelle Phillips, the CEO of Transnet, expressed a plea to private enterprise to join them in partnership to bring funds, to bring skills, and to bring assistance to help them right the wrongs of the past. We have to address the theft. But, as was said previously, it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen without rolling stock. Yes, Transnet are going to make their B fleet available, the older locos, the older wagons, but we need modern stuff. And that's where the rail runner concept comes in. Trucking companies, by investing in a rail runner trailer, can now start investing in vehicles that can travel legally on road and safely on road, and legally and safely on rail. So all of a sudden it opens up a huge investment portfolio. But we all know that our fleet replacement is an organized business. We don't replace a whole fleet in a year. So this is going to take time for industry, private enterprise, to slowly but surely replace their current vehicles with vehicles that can move on road and rail. The Road Freight Association has a critical role to play. I was very interested to see how the name has changed over time. And with government pushing the road to rail scenario, maybe we're due for another name change. But I'll leave that to the board of the Road Freight Association. The advantages of sustainable logistics is increased efficiency, combining multiple modes of transport, and can reduce transit times, especially in urban areas, border crossings, and improve delivery reliability. Cost savings. When the long distance is traveled on rail, cost savings of plus minus 20% can be achieved. The environmental benefits, Liesel has explained to us, and what was introduced to me last week at Africa Rail is that the beneficial cargo owner can actually apply for carbon credits if they're using a mode of transport which is a change from road to rail. So not the transporter, not the OEM, but the beneficial cargo owner can apply for carbon credits and drive their price of logistics down. So one other thing that we've got to just look at, and that's compliance. I've been in a compliance committee, and a lot of our clients are pushing for shorter turnaround times, lower prices, and it's putting a lot of pressure on the road freight industry to maintain quality, to maintain maintenance, to maintain discipline, and we've got to push back, and one of the ways we can push back is by offering the beneficial cargo owner a cost reduction by giving them their carbon credits. So, different way of looking at things. The rail runner system that I've spoken about is a road trailer. We push steel wheels underneath it, both sides, lift it up, connect 50 together, now we have a train. So that's how it works. And the next African giant won't be digital. They'll be rebuilding the continent's agriculture and logistics backbone. And I hope to see all of you in that effort and making money and being profitable. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Mike. Right, our next speaker is Warwick Lord. He is the chairperson of the Multimodal Inland Port Association, also known as MIPA. Correct pronunciation, I hope. Right. Warwick is the chairperson of the MIPA, a role in which he champions the integration of rail and road freight to enhance South Africa's logistics efficiency. Under his leadership, MIPA has advocated for private investment in rail operations, aiming to reform the industry and promote sustainable trade practices. Warwick's strategic vision has positioned MIPA as a pivotal force in transforming the nation's supply chain landscape. Warwick, you've an hour.
Thank you kindly. I don't know who that praise singer is who wrote that, but that's excellent. I must please get some of that. Colleagues, thank you, and thank you for having me. I think today I'm going to have an interesting discussion, and you've heard a lot of detail around what's happening in the changing supply chain. I'm not as sophisticated or as elegant as the previous speakers, and so I'm going to be doing this for dummies. I hope that's okay, so that we understand, at least my sort of 7 or 8-year-old can understand. Now, a very interesting topic I've got today, because it got pitched to me as how do you invest in inland ports and generate revenue? Well, us as the private sectors haven't got that right just yet. Cater Ridge Inland Port is very close to break even, but not there yet. And so we've still got a long way to go. However, hopefully during the rest of my conversation, all of my 45 minutes that are left, I'll be able to highlight some of the issues and areas that you can get involved in, specifically in this rail renaissance that is currently happening. Now, firstly, it's important, and I know a lot of speakers spoke to this, and I thought I would just highlight it quickly. What is an inland port, freight village, or back-of port facility? All it is an area where densification and massification of cargo needs to happen, and you have more than one mode of transport. In Europe, there's barges, etc. In South Africa, we rely predominantly on rail and road, and so it's where these two converge. They act as a shock absorber in the supply chain, so that if there are any undue events, which happen often in this country, we're able to accommodate those at these multimodal facilities. Excuse me. The back-of-port component of an inland port acts as the outer gate, and therefore truckers, especially yourselves, who now have to come into the port areas, can now rather call it a back-of-port facility, and then you have entered the outer gate of the facility. Of the port, which means that you avoid the Durban or in my case, the Durban CBD, as well as the congestion around the Durban port. Thank you kindly. You see the frog busy catching me. So, what is the current environment we are seeing from our side? I'm not sure if any of you guys are students of Clem Santa or have seen some of the scenario planning he did, but what he has done, and I'm sort of a little bit of a student of it, is gone for scenario planning, and specifically he looks at the high road and the low road scenarios, and how do we know which one of these scenarios we're on? What he has identified is flags, red flags for the sort of low road, and those will be indications of the direction that SA supply chain or logistics is taken, or alternatively the high road, and these would be sort of green flag events. Now, Ian highlighted it, and I'm just going to draw a conclusion to a few. What we are seeing is significant green flag events with regards to the changing supply chain ecosystem that is currently underway, which means government are changing policy. The way we do things are changing. The fact that rail has to now perform significantly better than it has in its past now needs to happen. This is advocated by the following green flags. The NLCC was created, where private and public sector could now interact meaningfully. The RFA by Minister Creasy has been released. Freight logistics roadmap has been put out. Privatization of Pier 2. 24 to 36 months ago, if we had said the word privatization in front of politicians, it would have been a swear word. Now we're talking openly about it, and we must understand that this changing landscape brings a lot of opportunities. We're also seeing a high frequency of the changes. So there are lots of red flags that come up all the time. I'm not sure if you saw the statement that came out last night with regards to Transnet selling off its non-core residential property. Every single day it seems to be a new headline in this direction. So we've got a challenge. And what is the challenge? The challenge at the moment that I hear, and I've been in a boardroom where this was discussed, is there is a significant supply chain, a retail entity, a company, very big, national and multinational, and they sat down with their trucking company and said, we are going to be growing between 8 and 12% over the next 3 to 5 years. How are you going to accommodate our increased cargo needs without adding any more trucks? That was the challenge put out there. Our roads can't handle too many more trucks. We're also not able to just keep adding to the congestion. And I thought this was a very unique and interesting challenge, and was definitely a forward-looking retailer, understanding that we have an issue, and their portion of the supply chain can now address this. So if that's the challenge, what are the possible solutions? My view, and obviously being part of the Caterage Inland Port and the Multimodal Inland Port Association chairman, is to advocate for you augmenting significant portions of your truck kilometers with rail. Start thinking about it being a transporter instead of a trucker. Why necessarily do you just have to use your trucking assets when you can augment that with train assets that are not held by other entities? You can now get higher turnover with the same asset base. And these are things that have to start being considered, especially if you would like to be part of the early movers. At the moment, you've heard Ian discuss and a few other members about the changing supply chain, and many of us sitting at that table to try and change it in a certain way. What we are still seeing, or I'm seeing in my personal front, is a big lack of truck companies starting to take up the mantle and actually being challenged by this and saying, well, how can we be part of this process? Because I think your voice is a critical component, because as trains start becoming more prevalent in the supply chain, understand a train never does the last mile or the first mile, which means every single aspect of a train journey requires at least 2 truck journeys either side, as almost a staple. What the benefit of that is that you start doing higher frequency, lower distance trips, which means your horse and your trailer normally sleeps at home, along with your driver, starting to mitigate a lot of the risks that are currently being experienced by having your trucks. We saw the fatigue presentation earlier. You start avoiding a lot of those issues. So, in closing, and to make sure we have significant time for lunch firstly, and secondly, a bit of a panel discussion, the rail renaissance is underway. I believe it's now harder to go back to where we were than to complete the journey to where we're going, i.e. we've gone over the Rubicon. I urge you to be part of the solution. You have taken up the mantle as the trucking fraternity and really moved South Africa when no one else was doing it, specifically the rail and pipeline components. So there needs to be a big cheer to you guys, but also a view that what is the next challenge that you need to address and the opportunity to grow your businesses therein. So I'd also like to suggest maybe a rebranding of the RFA. I'm also not going to suggest what it might be. Maybe just Road and Rail Freight Association, but we'll leave it at that. Lastly, it's up to all of us to roll up our sleeves for SA Inc. to make sure we get the architecture of the supply chain right. And please add your voice into the conversations so that we make sure all the voices are heard. Thank you kindly, guys.
Thank you, Warwick. Right, on Menti, I have the following questions. And in no particular order, Diesel, for the last 4 years, we were told that EVs is the way to go. Now the recycling of old batteries and other components are not so green. Now it's hydrogen. What is the real solution?
So to answer your question, it's multiple solutions. It's really going to be rare that it'll be a one-size-fits-all solution. Many of you in the room know that there are so many facets of transportation and impacts on fuel usage, route optimization. There's a ton of stuff. And hydrogen will potentially suit, because it's still new technology and we're still learning as it goes, the long-distance heavy haulage. And the short mile will definitely be more for EVs. That question is more along the lines of EV was supposed to blanket everything. It was the solution for all transportation. within a supply chain, but it's actually turning out to be closer to more the medium to short haul. And that's very clear, and I think that proof of concept has already been proved in the industry, particularly. I think now we need to say, well, how do we combine this with the long haul distance as well, and what kind of solution will be there? It could also be electric because of the charging technology that's improving and the ranges are improving, but it's definitely going to be a collection of effort around this. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all. Sorry, just around the recycling. A lot of these extended producer responsibility legislation and requirements out at the moment. So it's definitely something that is being looked at globally, and a lot of attention is being put on it. And it's a really important part of the whole life cycle, cost analysis, etc., of the vehicles.
Thank you, Liesel, for that answer. My goodness, my Mentimeter is going wild over here with questions for Liesel. Warwick, what are investment opportunities with inland ports and multimodal approach for transport companies?
Thank you. I'd love to answer that. I'd just like to hear from Liesel on that point first.
So actually I was going to raise this point, but there's some phenomenal work happening actually in Namibia with the port and the hydrogen systems that they've got in place there, and they're forming a whole ecosystem based on hydrogen. And that's really exciting. So I've been watching this pretty closely, and honestly, if you can envision one of your ports, but you've got charging stations, you've got hydrogen, it actually is growing now more into something that's a little ecosystem that can support this transition really well. So from that perspective, I'm quite excited about it.
Thank you, and that's definitely a big component of any inland port and the sort of opportunities that are there. So at the start, the opportunities are to own the infrastructure itself in different ways, shapes, or forms. So either the land itself, alternatively warehouses, alternatively the transfer facilities between road and rail. Then there's also the opportunity that Ian mentioned with regards to actually becoming train operating companies. What we're quite excited about is the next reiteration of that, when we start having the cargo owners being able to apply to have train operating slots appointed to it. So then there's also the fuel required, the diesel, both current, the sort of existing hydrocarbons, as well as the sort of more environmentally friendly from a charging perspective. We've got huge truck staging requirements that also allows a lot of opportunities. And what we're finding, as soon as we have a significant amount of trucks parked anywhere, it's amazing how many small service providers arrive to the area to check tires, etc., or alternatively just to sell them some product. So the opportunities are very wide, and when you're creating an ecosystem or a new town/city in an area, you can imagine all the sort of second and third order benefits that come from it. So massive.
Thank you, Warwick. Mike, a very difficult question for you. How effective is the current intermodal opportunities, and how will it work?
Kevin, I think we should hear from Liesel on this first before I comment.
I think that's fair.
I'm feeling a conspiracy here, guys. Seriously. I think they're tired of hearing my voice. You're more than welcome to answer that question. I'll just add my 2 cents into that as well. If you're going to mitigate your emissions within your supply chain, intermodal is critical. It plays a big role, and you're alluding to carbon credits earlier. So I think there's opportunity here for alternative revenue streams to offset the investment costs. And there's a lot of exciting projects like that happening, and in unique, innovative financing models, which are also going to address this gap that we have in financing this transition. So, yeah.
Well done.
Thanks, Liesel. I'm almost superfluous here. But intermodal and multimodal inland ports is a way of optimizing the efficiency of a logistic system. There is a Roanoke study that was conducted in America, and if anybody wants to have a look at a copy of that, I'll give it to them, where it showed that there was a massive increase in job opportunities by the installation of a multimodal terminal in a particular town. The town grew, the revenues grew, and once the multimodal terminal was there, the beneficial cargo owners actually moved their factories to that area, and it enlarged the town. The return on investment was somewhere between 20 and 30%, and this was proven by independent third-party studies. Thank you very much, Kev.
Thank you for that, Mike. It's not clear what the next person had in mind in terms of who should respond. The question is, will EV be a big part for rail as well? Liesel?
Yes and no. So it all depends on the infrastructure. And that's really my answer around that one.
All right, thank you. That was a very good response there. Sorry, I just want to get my thumb on my cell phone to get the question back up. The next question, and this is not me, please just bear with me. I can only put out the questions that you ask. So, Liesel, what impact does the current power shortages in South Africa have on the suggested EV implementation?
So this question comes up a lot, and it's actually a bit frustrating for me because I wouldn't actually want any of our vehicles to be charged off the grid. We have the highest solar radiation levels in the world in Africa, and we should really start looking at channeling that and using solar energy to power these grids. And if you have a look in the bus industry and Golden Arrow, they've done exactly that. They have a massive solar power plant on their facility, and now they've got capacity to introduce a lot more electric buses into their fleet and charge it from renewable energy. And that's actually the ecosystem we want. That's what we're looking for. And alluding to my point earlier around resilience, it's better to be off the grid than rely on the grid.
Thank you. I have a question this time for Mike. Mike, this is a yes or no. Can you show us a picture of the smart concept?
Yes, I can. If you go to
Thank you,
railrunner.co.za, you can see videos of it working.
Thank you, sir. The next question, there we go, there's a good one. Based on CO2 emissions, what role does food recovery play in reducing the CO2 emissions? Is there a way of helping transporters support companies like SA Harvest to transport food that's dumped? Warwick, I would ask you to respond to this, but this is not your area. Liesel?
That's actually, it's a phenomenal point because someone once said to me around waste, or the saying goes, something has to go somewhere. And food waste actually has quite a big methane proponent if it's just left in a landfill. And so those averted methane emissions are massive. Not to mention it's addressing the societal issue of feeding people. So it's critically important, and there's also a carbon offset potential there as well that can be looked at. So, yeah.
Thank you for that very concise response. And this one is for Warwick. Are there any plans to introduce maglev technology for our rail network? Sorry, that's maglev technology.
You're going to have to explain what maglev technology is first.
I'm lost. Mike, can you possibly help?
Not at the moment. Maglev technology is the high-speed trains in China, where the train actually floats on a magnetic field above the rail. Some of them are guided with the wheels on the track. Some actually float above the track. There's no plans for maglev in this country. A lot of people have thought that they could put a third rail next to our rail system and have standard gauge. The curves are different, the switches are different. There are so many differences between the two that you cannot mix the two. What we've done up in Africa is we have transported goods on a Cape gauge, then moved it onto a ro-ro across the lake, and then onto standard gauge to the port. So that is possible, but to mix the two isn't, and maglev is extremely expensive. Thank you.
If I can just come in and add to that, sort of when we had a look at that train system in China at the time, the gentleman who was taking us around told us that this is great, showcasing how good Chinese technology is and the ability to deliver. However, from a cost-effective point of view, it doesn't work at all. So it was a little bit of a, not a vanity project, but showcased a project that could work, but not necessarily commercially viable.
Thank you. And one final question. I think we are running out of time. If you're looking at your watches right now, you'll have noticed we are heading at 12:30. So this will be the last question. And surprise, this question is for Mike. Does intermodal technology allow the same capacity, tonnages or volume, whether it's on rail or road?
It's a difficult question to answer. In that, but I'll give you a practical example. The Citrus Growers Association approached us to transport citrus for them. And they were encouraging us to go for longer trailers and get another row of cartons in. However, we found that by shortening the trailer by approximately a meter, we were able to get additional trailers into the allowable train length, and the whole train transport from farm to port was cheaper per carton by shortening the trailers. But tonnages remain what they are. We have bridge law, we have axle mass laws on rail, which are very similar, and that defines what cargo can be transported.
Thank you, Mike. I'd also like to say thank you to our panelists. If we can give them a nice round of applause. Thank you very much.